He's never fought us. Not us united.
Die. Oh! I can so see that. That's it. Welcome on to Capes, the premier podcast of Comics League. I'm Jared. I'm here with Nick from the Phoenix Press. What's up, dude?
Oh, not much. I just feel like talking about some eras.
As Nick hyped up, we are talking about what we think were the best eras in comic books. But before we get into that, make sure you like, comment, subscribe, share the video. It really helps this channel grow. So Nick, so if you've been following this channel for a while, you know that we're all a fan of specific eras in comics, particularly the ones that like we came into this medium. Me, it's like the new 52. Nick, it's post-crisis, I believe.
Late 90s, early 2000s.
Oh, the 90s. That was quite an era. Let's talk about that real quick.
Yeah, the 90s can be divided into kind of two parts. Early 90s, you had the comics boom era, which was a very artistic-centric era. And then post-crash, comics crash. Late 90s was more like the stunts. Like late 90s is really the first time you had Lois and Clark marry.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's crazy that it took till like 97 for them to actually marry. And then like that kind of era bled into like the 2000s, which is with like kind of like I call it like the reinvention era, where like you had the comic movies are starting to really come out and like the Ultimate line, and then you had like this big push to like kind of modernize comics to a certain degree.
You also had, during the early 2000s, the best run for Carol Danvers that has ever been out for Marvel in the Brian Reed run. The one where she was actually, first off, Ms. Marvel, and second off, a good character. That's the thing.
Yeah,
And plus, also with Marvel in the early 2000s, they were firing on all cylinders. You had like Civil War, Secret Invasion. Let's see. What else happened at that time? Like the new Avengers. You had like Marvel was like on fire in that period.
That's not even getting into the Ultimates line.
Oh yeah.
And to be fair, DC was on fire too. Like you had just on the Batman end, you had Batman Hush, you had Batman War Games. I know I beat the drum to those storylines so much.
Well, Hush and War Games are so good, so you have a right to. But continuing, but I mean, and then you have like the new 52, which I'll admit was an era. First off, it had some good stories, but it was an era that was supremely poorly planned. Like, wow, it seemed like they only had plans for like a year to a year and a half, and then it all went downhill. But there were still some excellent ideas in that. Like Superman.
What's funny is,
yeah.
I was actually I had a poll for Red Hood and the Outlaws and Nightwing, and I actually canceled my subscription about a year and a half into both of them. So it's funny you mentioned that.
Well, yeah, because a lot of times, see, here's the thing with the new 52. I get that they were trying to try new things and everything, but sometimes it seemed like they were just changing things for the sake of changing things, like with the Mr. Freeze origin story change, which destroys the character.
Yeah, frick that.
But I mean, there were some good changes, like that's, I believe, when they really solidified Red Hood as not coming back to life because of the retcon punch. It's instead like his body was dug up by Talia, brought back, and put in the Lazarus pit.
Like, trained. I'm sorry, that storyline just makes so much more sense because, like, I could actually see Ra's al Ghul being guilty that he died because he hired the Joker and whatnot. Like, it just makes so much more sense.
Hence the movie.
Yeah, but I'm sorry, that origin makes so much, and that actually like adds to his insanity a little bit because Lazarus bit.
Well, yeah, and then you also have like during that period, you have like a terrific Batman run. Speaking of Batman, because you had like Scott Snyder and Greg Capullo doing like their first arc, The Court of Owls. Their first arc is known as one of the best Batman stories of all time.
Yeah, because like The Court of Owls was probably one of the best additions to the Batman canon. Probably, I'd say ever since the reinvention of Mr. Freeze back in the 90s, that's like the best addition to the Batman lore.
Because Batman traditionally knows everything about Gotham, and then there's like he missed this big detail.
Yeah, and the thing is, they wrote it so beautifully, so that makes sense why Batman would not have noticed it, because that takes skill. World Series detective not noticing something, you got to be a really good writer just to justify why he'd never noticed it.
Yeah, and then you had this period called DCU, which was stories over continuity. This is where you had Batman dead and Jim Gordon in the bunny ears battle suit being Batman. You had Superman in a t-shirt and a Harley going across America. But at the same time, you also had the regular series with Batman and Superman being normal. That's why it was like no continuity, and that was arguably the major reason why they did Rebirth, because DCU destroyed the new 52's credibility. Like completely.
I'd say the really big diff now was Convergence, where they kind of brought back, like for a short time, the pre-crisis heroes. And I think it was just so popular seeing those people again. I think that was what it was like, okay, yep, New 52's dead.
Mm-hmm. True. But I feel like there were other ways for them to address the criticisms of the New 52. What I think they should not have done was put like different authors on like Action and Superman, because then you lead to like disunity between in storylines between the two books, because one's supposed to take place 5 years before the other. They have to be able to talk at some point.
Well, my counter argument is that you just needed someone at the top for the line. Someone running the Superman line, someone running the Batman line. Kind of like what they do in Marvel, where you have someone run the Spider-Man line, someone run the X-Men line.
I think they had that.
Someone being like, okay, this is Superman, this is what's going to happen. But yeah, like you had one book taking precedence over the other, and the book taking precedence was in the past, so you was really hamstrung, and it was not the way to do things.
Plus, here's why I think that happened, because the Action Comics writer was Grant Morrison, and no one wants to in any way edit Grant Morrison. And I'm like, no one should have that power if you're an employee for DC, but that's besides the point. But let's go back to talk about the 90s. I like to call the 90s the throwing stuff at the wall and seeing what sticks, because they were trying like everything, like Superman getting electric blue powers.
They killed Superman.
They killed Superman and brought him back. They damaged Batman's back. They almost did the rape of Wonder Woman. It really like... It's almost like they were like, okay, so let's get everyone in the room. No is not an answer to any of these stories.
Yeah, Death in the Family was a really interesting thing.
Mm-hmm.
I was actually watching a live stream where they had Chuck Dixon on. Shout out to our earlier interview, and he talked about Batman, where it's like everyone wants a murderous Batman. He wants him to kill people. So we gave them exactly what they wanted with John Pell Valley, and they hated it.
Mm-hmm.
It was a really interesting thing by Chuck Dixon to say, and I don't know. It's just I like it.
Comic Historian had a funny point where he brought up, this is kind of funny. Back then, people were like, okay, so we want Batman to kill people. Fast forward to Zack Snyder, what is he doing? Batman would never kill people. That's the funny.
Yeah, and it's the same thing. It's like, oh, we want Christopher Reeve Superman. Then they gave him as close to a Christopher Reeve Superman as you can get. Superman Returns, and not many people showed up. Even though I think Superman Returns is actually a pretty good movie.
It is rarely enjoyable. I may watch it later, but the thing with the 90s, what you have to understand is that it was the era of big pouches, Let's see what else. Really high hair, and girls had like a lot of hair, because if you look at like Mary Jane in the Todd McFarlane line, there was like hair for days. You look like Medusa, kind of.
And we can't forget the two biggest other things.
Which were?
I was trying to be coy.
Well, if it's explicit, you can't say it here.
They're big, they're round, they're soft.
Oh yeah, I know what you're talking about. They really emphasize certain parts of female anatomy in this.
Like I said, I was trying to be coy for the sake of,
Plus, you also had like Sue Storm changing her costume, and it was really, really weird.
Like, here's the thing. I like a good-looking costume, but like that Fantastic Four one was way over the top.
Speaking of over the top, how about Wonder Woman's biker costume in this time period?
I don't know. I like a good biker chick.
I mean, it was cool. It's cool looking, but for Wonder Woman, it doesn't work. For Wonder Woman.
What, you don't like her riding her invisible motorcycle?
No, but I think it could work better for a character like Huntress, as opposed to Wonder Woman, who's supposed to be like a warrior and all that stuff.
Huntress actually does ride a motorcycle.
No, I know that. But I'm just saying that costume would fit more to a character like Huntress, because Wonder Woman's supposed to be like a Greek warrior, a Greek goddess, and dressing like a biker just doesn't work. It really doesn't. Then you also had the weirdest era, one of the weirdest era for Superman, because you had him getting his electric blue powers after he dies and comes back to life. And you also have the 4 Superman. It's like they were like, okay, so let's really like expand this, because, and to tell you the truth, you also had the best era of Justice League in a long time with Grant Morrison's run. And what's cool about it, Grant somehow managed to make the electric blue Superman work. Somehow they were able to take, because what's kind of funny is like during Grant's run, not only is Superman blue, but Wonder Woman dies and is replaced by Hippolyta. So Grant has to like put in all these changes to their Justice League run, like with little to no warning, and they just do it like perfectly.
Yeah, speaking of like really good runs, I want to give a shout out to the Teen Titans run of the early 2000s, because like I'm a Marv Wolfman, George Perez fan. That run is probably the only other run that I think actually comes close to matching how good Teen Titans is.
You mean the Jeff Johns run?
Yeah.
Yes. My man, there you go. Oh, speaking of fantastic runs during the early 2000s, how about Green Lantern by Jeff Johns?
Oh, yes. Yes, I agree.
Because when you think about it, and it's like EVS has been very vocal about it. He's like, okay, so the idea was, okay, so there's no way the Green Lanterns are the only core. There's absolutely no way with all this. So let's just have it based on every emotion. And then that's where we got the color spectrum. The thing is though, okay, so life and death are emotions now. That's the one thing where I'm like, okay, that's kind of weird, but I get it. It was really cool. And then we got like Blackest Night, Sinestro Corps War, so many fantastic storylines. And we got, in the Teen Titans run too, because you also you had like, isn't that when like Lex Luthor takes over control of Connor?
Possibly, I think.
Yeah, and he like beats the ever living out of the Titans or Teen Titans.
I can see that, yeah.
Because Tim Drake was Robin at that point, right?
Yeah, Tim Drake was Robin for quite a long time, like at least 20 years.
Yeah, and arguably one of the best Robins, to tell you the truth. But that's.
I mean, if we're talking about like my favorite Robin, it's Tim Drake. I mean, Dick Grayson's my favorite hero, but he's Nightwing. Like Dick Grayson is Nightwing to me. So but as far as my favorite like Robin, it's Tim Drake.
Mm-hmm. True. That's interesting there. In terms of my favorite Robin, it's a tie between Jason and Tim. Jason, because he stands as an interesting refutation to Batman's whole no killing rule, but they kind of have like brought him more in line with Batman recently. And Tim, because they've said he's a better detective than Batman. In fact, as you bring up all the time, Ra's al Ghul even called him detective, which is huge for Ra's al Ghul to call someone that.
Yeah, because like for the longest time, like basically the dynamic was Dick was a better fighter. Like Dick was a fighter who could go toe to toe with Batman and like maybe even possibly win. And then Tim was the better detective. You know, like they both were better at certain aspects of Batman.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. In a way, you could think about it as each Robin is a reflection of one part of Batman. It's like you could say Jason is Batman's anger. Nightwing is Batman's like hope, small sliver of hope left. And then I have to say that because Batman's not that hopeful. And Tim is Batman's intelligence, and Damian is, I guess, skill as a fighter.
He's Damian.
He's Damian. But speaking of that, and like, was it the early 2000s that you also had Damian coming in?
Early to mid 2000s, because I know by the time of Battle for the Cowl, which was like 2007, he was there, and it was after Battle for the Cowl that he became Robin.
I also got this, by the way.
There
you go. This is the first appearance of Damian.
Nice.
But, yeah. And arguably it was one of the coolest additions because, yeah, Batman has to raise a son that was raised by League of Assassins. So Batman is essentially why the idea of like Batman and or Superman having a kid works, because they're then teaching the kid. And it's like also with like particularly Damian was raised to be more in line with Jason Todd. You would think that Jason is his real father, but not, and I believe they kind of played with that like at some point, which was weird.
Well, the thing is, the idea of Batman having kids is honestly not that foreign because Robin is essentially his kid.
Mm-hmm.
Basically they gave him a kid as early as like the 40s. And like there's a reason why they call Nightwing Dick Grayson Batman's greatest success. To contrast that with Jason Todd as Batman's greatest failure.
Mm-hmm.
So like it's just the only difference between Damian and the rest of them is Damian is a blood descendant, not a ward.
Yeah. And then let's talk about also what we also have during the early 2000s, well, the 90s is sort of them DC trying to make Aquaman cool. Because remember, previous to this, you had the Super Friends, where he was riding a seahorse and talking to fish.
Captain Hook.
In this one, they gave him a hook hand, beard, long hair, tattoos. They basically turned him into Jason Momoa before Jason Momoa was cast as Aquaman. Because that's what he was back then. And then he was a badass. And then that's where, arguably, that was when the Super Friends rendition of Aquaman stopped. Because from there on, he was this badass character.
Yeah, the thing is, even with that run, I don't think people were really into it. It really wasn't until Jason Momoa and Aquaman came along. Because honestly, like if you look at that run of Aquaman, they were setting up a lot of the stuff that people would eventually like the royal politics, the royal intrigue, kind of like the underwater Game of Thrones-esque kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. That when they did that in the Aquaman movie, people loved it, myself included. I think it was just Jason Momoa kind of gave him like the personality, the kind of the edge that people really just were digging.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. I love that. And that's what made me an Aquaman fan, because previous to that, I thought he was a joke. Then I saw him in Justice League, even if it was the non-existent cut of Justice League. And I was like, oh, I like this guy, even the Aquaman movie. And then you also have
you don't like fake mustaches?
No. And you also have what's kind of interesting. What I think was one of the biggest gambles DC ever took during the early 2000s is the 52 series. So for context, after Infinite Crisis,
52 was 2010s.
Okay. But in that period, then, for context, after Infinite Crisis, Batman, Superman, and Wonder Woman went on a sabbatical. They still showed up in the comics, but they weren't like the face of DC for a year. And what DC did is have a series called 52, which highlighted a lot of the less highlighted DC characters and put them in the forefront for a year.
I thought you were talking about the new 52.
No. That comes in that comes like 2012, I think. But
2012, yeah, roughly around.
Yeah, because I'm pretty sure 52 happened mid 2000s somewhere there. A lot happened in the mid 2000s, but
yeah,
it's like putting like Booster Gold at the forefront of your universe. Booster Gold, Starfire at the time. Who else? Like,
so I guess you could say they gave Booster Gold
a boost.
A boost.
I knew you were going to go for that one. But yeah, it was really cool. And that's also where we got arguably the best Black Adam story, World War III, where his family are killed and he basically pretty much almost destroys the world.
And
then you also have, like, during that time period, when you get the Final Crisis, first off, the return of Barry Allen, because he died. He was dead from Crisis on Infinite Earths to arguably Infinite Crisis, when he pulls Superboy Prime into the Speed Force, but he didn't return to the DC universe until Final Crisis. So for like 30 or so years, Wally was the only Flash. Which he was my Flash forever, because remember, as I've said multiple times, I started on the Justice League animated show. But
yeah, that's why when they did the Justice League animated show, that's why Wally was the Flash, because he was the current Flash at the time.
Yeah, Barry was dead at that point. And remember, what's also kind of funny, during the early 2000s, this was also when DC and Marvel brought back comic book characters that we were previously told would not come back. Like, within a month, Jason Todd and Bucky Barnes came back to life, arguably as similar characters too. And then also,
all right,
go ahead.
Let's kind of talk about those two runs, Under the Red Hood and Winter Soldier,
which were fantastic, by the way.
Yeah, like we talk about Under the Red Hood a lot, but I don't think we've given enough love to Winter Soldier.
Oh,
just how much of a game changer it really was.
Yes, let's go ahead. Because first off, I'm a huge fan of the Ed Brubaker Captain America run, and if you guys are fans of any of the Captain America movies, pretty much that was Ed Brubaker. Arguably the first one was more of like the original Captain America comics, but particularly Captain America 2 and 3, that is the Ed Brubaker Captain America.
First Avenger is more doing the Joe Simon, Jack Kirby era.
That's what I kind of corrected myself. And then Civil War is pretty much a really dumbed down version of the Civil War comic, but 2
could argue the story makes more sense in the movie than it does in the comics.
A little bit, but let's put it this way: they talk this out more in the movie than the comic. But in the Captain America Winter Soldier storyline, imagine you're Captain America and you're fighting Hydra. Then all of a sudden, your buddy that you thought was dead comes back as an assassin and doesn't remember who he is.
It's crazy.
And then you discover, my favorite also is when, okay, so this actually happened after the Winter Soldier. The Winter Soldier comes back, and his memories, his identity has been restored. He runs into Black Widow, because Black Widow is responsible, because this is after Captain America's, air quotes, death. She's transporting Captain America's shield, and Bucky attacks her vehicle and retrieves it, and then they have a reunion, because remember, he trained her in the Red Room, and they kind of had a thing back then. Even they're like, wait, you're still alive?
Yeah, but she probably didn't know he was Bucky Barnes at the time.
No, she saw him as, it's because he at this point he didn't have the mask on anyway, so she immediately was like, "Oh, it's you."
Huh.
As far as I know.
But when they were training in the Red Room, did she know he was Bucky Barnes?
No, I don't think so. That I don't know. That I don't think so.
Okay.
And then you had, adding on to that, Bucky becomes the new Captain America.
And he uses a gun!
Oh my gosh! Oh no! But
I remember there was like news stories on like the nightly news about Captain America using a gun. It was that big of a deal.
Oh really? Wow! And it was a World War II style gun too. It wasn't even a modern one. But and that was really cool because you had this dude goes from, and this was a plot point in his run as Cap, where you have, so he's Captain America. He's supposed to be this sentinel of American liberty and justice, but he's also an assassin that has attacked American targets before. So he has to earn back the American people's trust as Captain America.
That just sounds like a good story.
And it's kind of funny. Talk about Iron Man. This also deals with Iron Man's guilt about what happened to Cap, because obviously he partly blames himself for what happened. And when he's trying to find a successor to be Captain America, because ultimately he realizes, hey, we need Cap. It's like we need Superman. So he goes to Bucky and he goes, okay, dude, Cap basically wanted you to take over for when he's dead. So what do I have to do to put you and this shield together today? So basically, Bucky says, okay, I don't want to take orders from anyone, including you, and I want you to get in my head and get rid of all this Hydra, but any residual Hydra brainwashing. And Iron Man's like, done and done. He does so. Then we have Captain America back. And this is the Captain America, by the way, for Secret Invasion, too. It was like he was into big events.
So I guess Iron Man was like, and will somebody please get this man a shield?
Yes. And get this man a shield. Yes, exactly. I love that one meme when it's Ant-Man, and get this man some orange slices. but then you have let me see what else happens there, and then you have, he also had a really good solo series with Black Widow, but he had arguably one of my favorite times as Captain America. I think that, again, the Brubaker run stands the test of time as one of the best Captain America runs, even after, because that's the way you do a legacy character taking over the mantle. Because what you do, you make it so you kill off the other character. In other words, what they should have done for Son of Kal-El is they should have killed Clark. Obviously, they're going to bring him back. But what they should have done is kill Clark and make it so John is the only Superman.
In all fairness, that's kind of what they did in the Ultimate Spider-Man universe.
Yes. And actually, Comic Historian had a fantastic video on Miles, and he says the problem with Miles is that he doesn't work in a universe where that also includes Peter Parker.
To be fair, to be fair, Miles' biggest... Okay, this is going to be a tangent. Miles' biggest problem is he's Spider-Man. They keep trying to push Miles as Spider-Man when no matter what you do, people are going to think of Peter Parker as Spider-Man. If you just give him his own identity... Because, like, there's a bunch of Spider people running around the 616. You got Silk. I mean, 2099 was in main continuity for a while. So it's like, there's no reason why you can't give Miles his own Spider name and have him do his own thing. You know, Nightwing him up, if you will.
Yeah, well, they tried to do that when they started calling him Kid Arachnid. But how about if we actually have a creative name? It's like, I
think Shadow Spider is what works well.
Shadow Spider, is that a little closer to Ghost Spider? Because remember, that's Gwen's name.
But Shadow Spider is just also like how he can go invisible.
Yeah, the thing is that he fits Ghost Spider more than Gwen when you think about it.
Well, that genie's out of the bottle. So
yeah, but if we had to do that, yeah, Shadow Spider works, particularly because he wears a black costume, so that works. But and that's the thing. It's like with Miles, they killed Peter and then he took over. That's why it was easier for people to like adapt this. It's like that's the problem with like.
Plus, all an alternate continuity, you know, it's like you still had main 616 Peter swinging around, no problem, and so it's like it's alternate continuity. Like, okay, yeah, see, they really need to bring back these alternate continuities so that way they can get these experiments and get like these cool ideas out there without affecting the main ones.
Yeah, and that's the thing. And that was Comic Historian's point. He said, the way you do this is you have to also provide the way for me to get my regular Superman, my regular Spider-Man, because then it's more like, because then you get both stories. If you want normal Clark Superman, you have that. If you want to see what John's doing, what John would do as Superman, you have here. But it's just, Comics Story agrees with
It's
me on
like
this
you
point.
can't you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink.
Yeah.
You know, and when you force people into something, they tend to get more resentful and they go in the opposite direction. You know, versus like, hey, we're just doing this new character. If you like the old character, they're right there. They're still doing their thing. If you never want to touch this new character, that is perfectly fine. That old character's still there for you.
And actually, it's kind of funny. This is a perfect transition to the all new, all different era. So continue.
Oh, I'm good.
Well, here's the thing with all new, all different. That's why I think that's the chief reason why I think that failed miserably. Because what they should have done, instead of replacing all the superheroes in the main universe, just create another Earth again. Because the problem with it, and Comics Explained also addressed this point, he goes, problem with it is that if you want to read the Incredible Hulk, the only way to read the Incredible Hulk is Amadeus Cho. The only way to read Iron books is with Riri. The only way to read Captain America is with Sam. And if you wanted to read Steve, well, you're screwed. That's it. You're done.
Yeah, and this is arguably during the time where the characters will never ever be as popular as they were in the 2010s. Like Iron Man, Captain America, Thor, those characters will never again be as popular as they were in the 2010s, and Marvel screwed the frickin' pooch.
Can you imagine, Nick, if they had actually not swapped the characters, if they had really hammered in the classic Avengers when the movies were coming out? Like, geez, comics would not be as like niche as they were now had Marvel decided, let's not replace the characters now while the movies prominently feature these characters and we can plug them at the end of the movies.
I would argue the reason why Marvel didn't do an alternate continuity is because you got to remember the Ultimates line really only crashed and burned like the late 2000s, early 2010s. So Marvel was like the crash of the Ultimate line was still pretty fresh in their heads. So I don't think they were really eager to just kind of jump into that boat again.
Well, I'm not saying alternate continuity. I'm just saying don't replace them. Just don't do it.
I think DC should do. I think DC should do something similar to the Ultimate lines now. Like
that'd be the best way to do it right now, dude.
Like you want your gay black Superman, do it there.
Yeah, have another Earth where you can have all these experimental books where it won't affect the overall continuity. If you want to explore Tim Drake going on a date with a dude, that's fine. Do it on that Earth. Because I think in the main Earth should be reserved to classic superhero stories of superheroes punching criminals. That's what I go to when I want to read a Batman, a Superman, a Wonder Woman, a Justice League book. That's what I go to.
Yeah, I just think honestly, I think just split it off, and you have the main continuity for the more traditional stuff, and you have the alternate continuity where literally anything goes. Like you want. Like you want a female Batman for some reason.
You want a Wonder Bat, you can have it there. Earth BS. Earth BS. I had to do that. But
I promise you, when I write Batman, I will write a Wonder Bat story, and I will have them like do a full page splash of them kissing,
and then I'll immediately take over the title after you and make it where they have a violent breakup. But
well, what if I put a character in there who's like an internet blogger named Jared?
No, I will kill off that character, and then
kill yourself. Holy crap!
It's not me in the comics, so I'm just saying. But
it's meant to represent you.
No, but the thing, but yeah, that's what DC should have done in the New 52. They should have made that the alternate universe, even after Doomsday Clock. But they should have done instead of not do any more the New 52 after Doomsday Clock. The reason why I say this because Doomsday Clock specifically in the last couple of pages establishes that Earth 52 is its own Earth. They should have said, okay, we're going to launch the Earth 52 line where it's just stories over there. If you want to follow that line, it's going to be all the New 52 books. That way,
kind of like how they had the Earth 2 line.
Yes, and that did really well, and that's also arguably what made Tom Taylor the name he is today, and established the Tom Taylor paradox, where he writes the best Elseworld stories ever for DC.
I would argue, I feel like DC does multiverses better than than Marvel, because like Marvel, it's just like whatever universe is current one, that's the important one. They don't really have multiple universes running in parallel, like the Earth 1, Earth 2 kind of thing. Like I don't really think Marvel does that.
Yeah, and again, that's what DC could do to compete with Marvel severely, because Marvel doesn't do that. DC can, and with proper planning, run well 2 alternate continuities, one for the newbies, one for the people who like all this convoluted continuity. That would really set DC apart from Marvel. Yeah. It would really work. It would work extremely well, but unfortunately, DC doesn't do stuff that's smart. But that's besides the point.
Well, you could say the same thing in Marvel, but you know,
Marvel, I practically lost all hope for Marvel.
That's a whole nother episode of Under Two Capes. But
yes, exactly.
Before we do anything else, I do want to kind of briefly touch upon the early Ultimates line.
Yeah, go ahead.
We kind of talked about it. I really feel like Ultimate X-Men and Ultimate Spider-Man, and really the Ultimates line in general were really important for comics, because basically the early MCU was basically Ultimate based, and even Fantastic Four 2005, or even honestly the X-Men movies were heavily inspired by the Ultimate line.
And in terms of like the character designs, majorly, the Avengers movie is based upon the Mark Millar, Brian Hitch Ultimates comics.
Yeah, though I think in X-Men's case, it's probably the reverse. I feel like the Ultimate comics, the costumes were made more based on the movie than the other way around.
Yeah, I think that the ones in the movies were primarily based on the Grant Morrison ones.
The Grant Morrison, no, actually, the First Class X-Men costumes are based on the Grant Morrison run.
Oh, okay.
Because the Grant Morrison ones actually had more color in them, than they had the X in them.
Okay.
So like the First Class suits are the Grant Morrison suits.
Okay, yeah. That makes sense. But yeah, the early Ultimate, because again, Ultimate Spider-Man, is one of the series of Ultimates that was consistently good its entire run. What, Nick?
There, buddy.
What?
You froze there. Just edited it out.
I was just saying the Ultimates line. I mean, the Ultimate Spider-Man line was one of the Ultimate comics which was consistently great its entire run. I think
it really was.
Like, wow! Even the design for Ultimate Deadpool was kind of dumb, but still, it was like, wow. There's very few, if any, really like low points for Ultimate Spider-Man.
You know what would be an interesting discussion?
What
if, like, how would we do an Ultimate DC? Like, how would we reinvent some of these characters for modern day?
We're gonna. That's a fantastic idea. That could be a Comics League Dark topic, or in Under Two Capes topics. We'll probably do that.
Yeah, I'm just putting it out there.
And by the way, drop in the comments if you would like to see that discussion.
Also, we need to bring in Jay Heath for that one. I think his input would be helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. So before we wrap this baby up, so now, Nick, what was your absolute favorite era of comic books?
Early 2000s.
Yeah, that honestly, mine is from the early 2000s through the new 52 and a little bit of Rebirth, because that was all like some of the best comic storytelling from both DC and Marvel of all time.
If you want me to go broad, I'd say it's basically from about a 10-year period. I say from 97 to 2007. Mm-hmm. That is my era, because I really kind of stopped reading around 2007. I picked up a little bit in the New 52 era, but that lasted like a year tops.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, true. But yeah, because all that is like some of the most legendary stories. Because when we're talking about the 90s, we even talk about Kingdom Come, which was honestly, when you think about it, the most gorgeous comic book DC has ever produced. I will stand on that hill.
Oh, if we're talking about legendary Batman stories, we got to talk about Cataclysm and No Man's Land.
Mm-hmm. Which No Man's Land has been like the basis for multiple Batman movies.
Dark Knight Rises at the very least.
Oh yeah, Dark Knight Rises, and then maybe a little bit the end of the Batman, and maybe the beginning of the Batman 2, depending on when that takes place after Gotham is flooded. But see what happens with that. But yeah, that's around the time, because while I like 90s, a lot of it is like, I call it shock value, because they're like, let's do this. No, let's do this. Let's give Superman a blue costume. Let's kill Wonder Woman, and let's break Batman's back and replace him with a murderous Batman.
I would call the early to mid 90s the era of the overindulgence. Basically, you had these like rock star artists and
Image, baby.
Not just Image, but Marvel and to a lesser extent DC were doing the same shtick, where they were basically overindulging these artists, and you got over-designed characters. The writing was crap. You're welcome.
It's true.
And it wasn't really until the late 90s when writers really started to rule the roost, so things kind of got under control.
Speaking of DC in the 90s, so the story goes that when Todd McFarlane was forming Image with the guys, they went to DC, and DC thinks, oh, we got Todd McFarlane, we got Jim Lee, we got Silvestri, we got all these guys. This is so great. And then Todd goes, actually, we just came here to tell you we'll never come work for you. I'm like, that is so Todd McFarlane. Jeez.
Yeah.
Speaking of
to
which,
be fair, they did get Jim Lee, so
yeah. Speaking of which, we have some time. Let's talk about Image, because that happened in the 90s and arguably revolutionized a lot of the comic book industry.
Yeah, like the indie comics definitely existed before then, because remember TMNT technically was an independent comic book. Like I'd say indies really started to take off in the 80s, but in the 90s is when indies really hit the mainstream. Like I'd say the 90s is really when the comic industry exploded with different companies that were basically competing on the same level as DC and Marvel, because like 90s saw the rise of not just Image but like Dark Horse and then and whatnot. I'd say the 2000s was the rise of like the licensed comic companies like your IDWs, your Dynamites, your Boom Studios. They really became prominent in the 2000s.
Yeah, and plus, even with Image, remember, the founders of Image were all the writers and all the artists for all of the top books at Marvel. So Marvel, in one fell swoop, lost all their top artists.
Well, they basically lost them because of like it's a tale as old as time. You know, artist puts in more effort for the story. They want credit / compensation. Company won't give it to them. They're like, no, sorry, we'll make our own company. You had the same thing happen in the video game industry back in the early 80s. You had some creators at Atari who wanted credit. Atari said no, so they formed Activision, the first third-party company.
I remember even McFarlane goes, okay, so if for the minimal amount of effort, they could have kept us. It's like if they took an image of my Spider-Man and put it on a T-shirt, could I at least get a copy of the T-shirt? And Marvel was like, no. So they're like, okay, I'm out. And it was kind of funny, is that, like you said before, Jim Lee would eventually have an executive position at DC when he sold Wildstorm to DC.
Yeah.
But I have a few of those first books of Image. Like I have a Savage Dragon one and Wildcats one and Youngblood one, and they're actually pretty cool. Like insane,
the thing about early Image is really Spawn is really the only character that really broke out. The rest of them had middling success. Spawn was the only outright out and out success of that line. Like Spawn was a phenomenon back in the early 90s.
And speaking of Spawn, come Saturday we will be talking about that movie. Which was
Guess what they
great.
want? You're playing a game.
Yeah,
And I'll play
exactly.
dirty.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, Spawn was like the one character of those all those characters of that batch of Image Comics characters that really took off. Like, well, let me put it this way, they still all these books did well when they first launched, but Spawn was the one that set the standard. And even Tom
Spawn
McFarlane
was on a whole nother level.
Even Tom McFarlane said Spawn was the only one that also consistently was on time. The other ones like fell behind on schedule a lot.
Well, to be fair, Todd's always been a bit of a workhorse. Like, honestly, that guy's dedication. I also think, since Todd owned his own toy company, I think Todd was really, like, all the rest of them were artists and dang good ones, but Todd was also a really good businessman. Like, Todd, honestly, I think is probably one of the most underrated business people ever. Like, he's up there with Steve Jobs in terms of like business savvy, and that is, that's high praise.
Yeah,
like the way that he's I think Todd knew how to market his stuff and really get it out there in a way that the others could. And yes, owning a toy company was a bit of an unfair advantage. Let's admit that.
Yeah, that's true. But yeah, and what's kind of fun, yeah, I agree with you on that point. But so I think that's a good place to leave it. Drop in the comments. Well, first off, like, comment, subscribe, and drop in the comments your favorite era of comics, why you like it, what's your least favorite era of comics. As a matter of fact, Nick, real quick, what's your least favorite era of comics?
I'm gonna get a lot of heat for this, but the early to mid 90s.
Yeah, because
I'm gonna get a lot of heat for that.
Well, writing was not exactly the priority there. It's just, look, okay, pouches, extreme, and shock. It's basically the Michael Bay era of comics, as I call it.
Like, I'll defend 80s. Like, I think 80s comics, while they were definitely like really edgy, they at least were trying to create good stories. I think even though they're really, really dark and edgy, and they're at least trying something different. They're at least trying new innovative stories. It had a balance to it.
Yeah, but nowadays there was like, no, let's make sure it looks good, but the story's bad.
Yeah, we're kind of seeing that style come back, sadly.
Well, because a lot of these companies have this mentality that if it looks like Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, Spider-Man, people are going to buy it no matter how good the story is.
And look at the sales numbers.
Look at the sales numbers. That kind of reflects that. So, in terms of what else do you have coming out on the channel, Nick?
Well, you got tomorrow. You got my Friday Night Frenzy. Jared will be joining me for that. We're gonna be launching the pre-launch for Torrance Ceremony number 3, and then on Sunday we'll be talking about the Mario movie. I'll be going to see that one on Saturday. Jared will unfortunately not be there because he's a responsible adult.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, and in terms of, for me, we're gonna be doing but by the time this comes out tomorrow, we'll be doing the discussion of the Spawn movie. And also tonight, because this is coming out on Friday, we have Comics League Dark. We're talking about the Blue Beetle, the Spider-Man trailer, the now My Adventures of Superman a teaser that just came out, and we'll be discussing our favorite bat suits, the Gotham Knights cut content, and whatever else comes out between now and between the time of recording and the time of uploading, which Lord knows a lot could happen. And on Monday, I'm discussing the comic industry's problem with redundancy in terms of characters.
Why are there 50 different Spider-Men?
Why are there 2 Supermen? I'm gonna tell you that right now. It doesn't work. But I'll save that for Monday. Stay heroic, everyone, and we will see you in the next one. Bye bye.